Well, thank you for joining us today. My name is John Aldred, and in this webinar, we'll be looking at a new product called Aqira and how it helps you standardize global engineering processes across your organization. But first, let's take a look at one industry as an example and look at some of the challenges that are facing there. If you're in the automotive industry, for example, you're familiar with the significant changes underway and how they impact the engineering requirements. Vehicles are now, we're looking at all electric, lightweight, self-driving, connected, and more. So these are changes to the requirements for the engineers need to face. And so that means there are new technologies required to meet these demands, resulting in increased complexity, but also a need to reduce risk and improve reliability. And often in the context of a global organization where there are distributed roles and responsibilities. And these are just some of the challenges that mean engineering companies are looking to not just do smart work, but to actually work smarter. And before we dive deeper into the challenges and solutions we're talking about and how that is addressed by Aqira, let's just have a quick word about who we are. So HBM Prensia is a division of HBM focused on delivering software and services related to durability and reliability. And our two software brands are ReliaSoft for reliability engineering and nCode for durability prediction and high performance analysis of sensor data. And we've brought these two product ranges together in one licensing model called Prensia Access. And I mention this because you'll see this forms an important part of Aqira. And Prensia Access is a licensing model. It's a token licensing model. That means you can run any combination of nCode products like DesignLife and Glyphs, which you may be familiar with, or our recent addition for noise and vibration, VibeSys, but also enables you to run ReliaSoft products like the widely used Weibel++, or say XFMEA for improving the way you do FMEAs in your organization. Okay, a little bit of background there, just so you know who we are and what we're talking about. Okay, so let's get back to some of the challenges engineers face when it comes to analysis. In particular, what we see is in our customers as they use nCode products for analysis. So we see that engineers develop many different analysis processes. And we also see that those generate a whole bunch of files that are stored as separate files on an individual's PC. And that results in multiple copies of the same process in your organization. Some department uses one version, another department uses another. There's very little version control on those processes that are used. It's not easy to know who's using it. And as I mentioned, different departments have similar but different analysis methods. So maybe a very similar method has been developed in your organization, maybe in a different division or in a different country, with little or no documentation, and all that results in an uncertain quality of analysis. So those are some of the challenges that we see in our engineers. From a manager's perspective, we see that analysis can only be run, there are certain analyses that can only be run by the experts. It requires a certain level of expertise to be guaranteed of getting the right results. And in part, that's because the analysis tools that are being used have a lot of options that are irrelevant for the specific application and just shouldn't be changed as part of an analysis. So it requires an expert to know which buttons to press in the right order. And corporate knowledge, we find, is limited to only a few individuals. Even in big organizations, we see that there's often very key engineering knowledge that resides in just a small number of engineers. And spreading that analysis is difficult due to the expertise required, the software installations required, or even the computing resources that someone has to have access to. So all that means that there's an increased risk and also wasted opportunity from an engineering perspective. And lastly here, let's look at the challenges for IT managers in providing the infrastructure required for all of that. There's more installations and software to manage. Global licensing adds significantly to the cost if you're using applications worldwide. It can be difficult in license token systems to manage who has access to what, and there can be a feeling of we just have a whole lot of tokens and they're not in control. In the context of web-based software, it can be complex to provide that within an organization and the infrastructure required. For example, the databases that require DBA expertise or expensive enterprise-grade databases themselves and web application servers. All that requires IT infrastructure and support. That can be a challenge, resulting in higher costs and complexity. So there are some of the challenges that we see, even just in customers using nCode software for doing the durability predictions and high-performance sensor and analytics. We can see these kind of challenges. So the solution that we have developed is a product called Aqira. This is a web-based on-premises product that extends what you can do with nCode software and delivers an integrated engineering solution for all levels of users, not just experts, across both physical test and CAE simulation departments. So not just one or the other, but really brings together both into a single environment. So just to summarize quickly what the main features are, what does Aqira do? If someone asked you afterwards, what is Aqira? I didn't get it. Here are some points to focus on in terms of what Aqira is. So first of all, it enables you to manage and to share analytical processes. And we'll later on, at the end of the webinar, we'll run through a quick demo. You can see how that works. So you can manage and share analytical processes. You can also run nCode software fully over the web. You don't need a local installation. You can run nCode directly through a web browser. And that has benefits with regards both access for additional users within your organization. You can also, with Aqira, create and use what we call engineering apps. So you're familiar with having an app on your mobile phone? Well, this is a similar concept, but for engineering. So the ability to have a simplified front end that enables you to make a more sophisticated analysis easier to use for a less expert user. Because it's running on servers, you can then use Aqira to perform scalable server-based analysis rather than having to rely on your local performance of your laptop to run an analysis. So that's another benefit of it being a server-based product. And it's on premises, which means that you have direct access to all your data without having to put it somewhere else outside of your own control. Another benefit on the IT perspective, and this is one of the items that is really driving a lot of our customers to already have moved to Aqira, is the benefit of cost-effective deployment and licensing, the way that we can now use your Princia access tokens globally at a much reduced cost than would otherwise have been the case, and I'll explain that later in the presentation. And lastly, big token systems have that drawback of not having direct or having the ability to manage that directly, and Aqira provides that easy ability to manage access to the tokens, who has how many tokens, how many are set aside for which groups, which country. All of that can be managed in Aqira if you want to use Aqira for that purpose. So those are the features. Pull out a few of the benefits of Aqira. So that ability to standardize your processes, it means it's easier then to improve the quality of analysis that's being performed through your organization. It also then reduces the effort that's wasted in reinventing processes in different departments and different divisions of your organization. We also see that the benefit, therefore, to reduce the risk of reliance on few individuals and also enable less expert users to perform more analysis within your organization. And then from an IT perspective, Aqira provides cost-effective global access to the nCode software and also reduces the number of local installations required by enabling you to run our software directly over the web. Now, most of the benefits we'll be talking about today are in the context of using nCode software, but we'll also see how Aqira also provides a platform by which there can be a broader inclusion of other engineering tools into this platform through the web, through the app concept. So as I mentioned, starting with the nCode product and how that works, when you're using nCode desktop software like Glyphs and DesignLife, we have the concept of a flow. So you can see a screenshot there from our CAE product from DesignLife. You can see that you can graphically build up an analysis process using these building blocks that we call glyphs. It's very interactive, very graphical. You drag and drop data, you drag and drop these building blocks, press play, and you can process all that data. That process is then encapsulated and saved in a file that we call a flow. It's a flow file. It's a flow, and you can save it in a file. And Aqira takes that concept of these saved flow files and then enables you to be able to manage and share those flow files in a controlled way. So that's one of the items that's at the heart of Aqira in the context of nCode software, is really efficient, effective management of these flow processes. So flows can be then uploaded into Aqira. You can then document it, put them in a central location. You can put attachments on them, example files, PDFs. You can document it. You can also have version control on each one of those versions that you upload. You can add tags onto it for metadata, for searching. Provides a rich environment beyond just having a shared drive to be able to control these flow processes. Now, once you've put a flow into Aqira, you can then share it with other users. So if I put, here's another CAE process I put in, so it's not just for test data, it's also for CAE processes. I can upload my flow into Aqira. I can then decide who I want to share it with. I can share it with everyone in an organization, or I can share it with groups, and groups are easily created in Aqira. Groups are just a defined list of users. It's up to administrators. You can create as many groups as you want with as many users in those groups as you require, or you can actually share the flow with individuals in your organization. And for each one of those shares, every time you share it, you can specify what the permissions are so that everyone can view it, for example, but a group can open it and download it. But then even different permissions for every individual that you share it to. So it's a very flexible system for being able to control who can do what with the analysis process you put into Aqira. So here's a very important part of that control within your organization, maybe a global organization where you want to control who has access to what type of process within your company. Another important part when you start using analysis processes for real is the ability to manage flow versions. So you're going to share a version, and within Aqira you've got the concept of different flow versions. Initially, every flow starts in draft mode. It means only you can see it, you can edit it, you can delete it afterwards. You can it's just yours too. It's really your sandbox to play with. Once you share it with other people, then it becomes an available flow, and then you can update a new version, and so that's a controlled version in the system because other people have already started using it. If you decide you get to the point where that version has really been superseded and it no longer should be accessible, you can then retire that flow, and it is then no longer accessible to the general users. So that's again a brief summary of some of the capabilities on how you can use Aqira to share the processes. Another important part I mentioned earlier is the ability to run nCode software fully through the web browser. So this we term remote nCode. So there you can see a screenshot of nCode Glyphs in this case, or Vibesys, running directly in a Chrome browser and directly accessible to data that the server can see. So this means that the flows stored in Aqira can be opened by this version of nCode and used in a browser without having nCode installed on your own computer. You don't have to use the nCode version that's on the browser. You can download the files and use them just as you do today on your desktop. But this provides an ease of access, direct access. You can make edits. You can save that flow file back as a new version. You can do it all purely just with a PC with a browser installed. The next step, and this goes beyond just flow files, is the ability to use apps. Now, those flow files we just talked about, they can be complicated, and apps provide an easy-to-use front end for what could otherwise be a very sophisticated analysis. So with apps, this enables you to ask a few simple questions that are relevant, hide all the options you don't want the user to touch, and provide the results in an intuitive and graphical manner. So you go, just ask a few questions, put a simple front end, expose the options that you want the users to use, and then jump straight to the results, the ability to look at results, download results, all within a simple-to-use, simple-to-configure interface. And we've made it such that you can create those apps without you having to write code, without you having to be a programmer, without requiring an IT project to create them. Engineers can create these apps simply by using drag-and-drop components to put the various parts of the app in the sequence that are required. So that was on the apps side and the engineering side. On the IT side, let's look at an example of how Aqira can be a benefit for global licensing. So let's take an example. Let's consider a tier 1 automotive supplier with offices in 5 different countries. Now, there are different ways of handling that. With engineering software, you maybe have 5 separate licenses in each country. So every country has its own license, and that can have that increases the administration required, the amount of work required at renewal time, and also the inability to really share those licenses in a way that then you can use it where you have greater need. So the one solution for that is to go to, let's say, Frontier Access licensing with global multipliers on the cost, but that then makes the licensing significantly more expensive to have a license that can float throughout the world. Aqira provides a very nice solution for this by providing the ability to use LAN token pricing, in other words, local token pricing without the global multipliers, and instead the token license draw itself, i.e. the number of units that are drawn, is increased based on the time zone rather than the price. So this is always a benefit to the customer cost-wise, to be able to use this method whereby it's only effectively as needed that the cost is increased, but only in the sense of the number of units that are drawn, not in terms of the actual license cost itself. So here's an example with the 5 different locations. And with a license server installed in Detroit, that means all the license usage in Detroit would be at a 1.0 multiplier in terms of license usage. Sao Paulo would be a 1.25 multiplier in terms of usage. And only in Shanghai and in Pune would be the multiplier be 1.75 in terms of the number of units drawn. So this is always a win for the customer in terms of the effective cost. And we see again a great number of customers already moving to this model with Aqira because of these benefits. The license draw token then is based on where the time zone of the user is compared with where the license server is, based on the number of hours from the server. And that unit draw multiplier covers both license units that are floated to the desktops. It covers both nCode and ReliSoft software where they are used directly on a user's PC, and also covers, as we saw there, the remote nCode usage in Aqira, or if jobs were used on the server in Aqira, that usage within Aqira itself also takes into account the user's time zone. So so in summary, then let's just go through those points again. We've seen Aqira, how you can manage processes and analytical processes and share them, run nCode products directly over the web, only a browser required. You can now create engineering apps. You can perform scalable server-based analysis. You can benefit from cost-effective deployment licensing. And then also, I didn't show this, but you can also then control on a group basis how you can then access to access to units based on different license groups. So people in different groups can have access to different numbers of units if you require. So that's a very quick overview of Aqira. And what I'm going to do now is actually go through a demo. So I'm going to jump into the product itself. It's always good to actually see the product in action. So I'm going to now jump into Internet Explorer, where I'm going to log onto a machine to illustrate some of the capabilities that we were just looking at. So if I log into Aqira, the first thing you see when you log in is a dashboard. So the dashboard in Aqira is the ability for you to personalize what you see in Aqira. It could be the results of running an app. It could be the search of something you've looked for recently, the summary of something that's been run. And that's something you can configure. These are fully interactive displays. You can display into these. You can maximize them. You can restore it, etc. This is just a fully interactive dashboard with regards to results. But what I want to focus on first is down, if I look at the main menu down here on the left-hand side, is what we term the flow list. So in the flow list, this is the core capability for managing and sharing those nCode flow files that we referred to earlier. So here we have we have a list of flows that are in the system. I can see information summary on each one of the flows that are in there, and I can perform various obviously filters here to find the data I'm interested in. If I know the person who's created the flow, I can search on someone's name and find his flows that he has put into Aqira. I can use other means of finding flow files, processes in Aqira as well. For example, I have this advanced filter option. It has various capabilities, for example, searching on, say, the date when it was created. Also, if you're familiar with nCode products, we have those glyphs. If I know the type of glyph that's used in the process, I can literally look for flows that contain a certain glyph and build up a list of criteria of items that are in the flow file itself. Or I can tag the flows when they're uploaded to have metadata that describes it. So for example, if I say have tagged a certain set of flows here by being related to powertrain, I can then say pick that tag, hit apply, and then it's going to give me these flows that are related to a powertrain application, like in this case, the analysis of a thermomechanical calculation on a turbine wheel, for example. Perhaps the most simple way of looking would be just filtering based on the summary. Let's say I want to look for something related to constant amplitude, and I apply that filter. It brings up this particular flow, in this case constant amplitude test, equivalent constant amplitude fatigue test generation from variable amplitude. So here's a flow that's been created. If I have some options here on the right-hand side to perform various actions, one of which is the first one here is details. So I can click on that. I can get more information about I can have built-in descriptions for that flow. I also have the ability, and here's where I can add my tags to that flow. So here I could put this is related to, let's say, lab testing. I can add a tag to that. I can also then control versions for this. So there's the basic details, version information. In this case, there's only one version of this flow at the moment. Contents. I can see what glyphs are used in that process. I also have attachments. So for example, if I have here a PDF documentation, open this, I can jump straight into a Word document that gives me further documentation on that process. So in this way, I can see the. Is that shared? No. Okay. My apologies. It pops up in a Word document, a PDF on my side. I'm going to close that. But that can download a PDF file for documentation related to that. for that process. So let me just cancel out of that. So you can see here that with each flow that you've put into Aqira, I can provide a whole bunch of useful information about that flow, documentation that describes it, and version control. And I can then download that process and open it, and I'm going to share it when it comes open. So if so there it shares that and opens it directly within Glyphs. So right there, that has value from a process control point of view, central location, all the information, documentation, and I can download it directly and open it then in Glyphs directly on my machine. But that's not all Aqira can do. Not only can I download it, I can actually open it directly in the website itself. So right there in the browser, I can open the flow, and I can then select some data, drag it on, and I have a fully functional, fully interactive version of Glyphs, but now I'm running that purely through Internet Explorer. So no software needs to be installed. I can directly run nCode software simply with Internet Explorer on my computer, running analysis. And so if I run play here, there you go, a fully interactive version of nCode software. Could be Glyphs, Design Life, VibeSys, all running directly through a web browser with no software installed. I'm just going to exit out of that. If I was the owner of this flow, I can make changes, I can save it back, save it as a new version, and manage my versions that way. Okay, so that gives you some indication of the flows. I can, of course, also upload my own flow here. So if I do an import flow, it's very easy to add a flow into the system. I can just do import flow, browse, and I can say, here's a flow file on my machine. Hit open. Gives it a my summary report. Give it a little summary name. Hit import. Then going to import that, and that's it, it's done. Took it the local flow file from my machine, uploaded it through the browser to the server. I can then edit these details if I want. I can insert an image, add attachments, done. Now added that to this list here, measurement report. If I want to share it with somebody else, I go to this options on the right-hand side, say share, and I can pick with whom I share that flow that I've just uploaded. I can share it with everyone. I can share it with groups that are that I've defined within the system, or I can literally pick individual users to share that flow file with and set what permissions they have to download it, open it, whatever I allow them to do. All right, very good. So that's running with flow files. Let's now take a look at apps, and so that's an app flow list. Well, just as you can do with flows, we have a very similar view, but this time for apps themselves. And let me run an app, and you'll get some idea of what we mean by an app. So, for example, let me find just all the things I can do before in terms of filtering. So let me look for flows related to PSDs, and I've got 3 flows in this. Loaded in Aqira here related to PSDs, and I'm going to press the run button there. I'm going to run this first one, PSD envelope. Now instead of opening up a Glyphs process, it's giving me a simple front end. And my simple front end, the first thing it does is it asks me for some files. So these are files that are accessible to Aqira on the server. So for example, I'm going to browse to some files that are in my working area on the server. Now that could be I can change path, and I can browse to any shared drive or any location that the installation has access to within your organization. So that's obviously within the domain of your IT to configure access to the files as required. But once you've browsed to the data of interest, I can say select all, select the files that I want to run through this process. Simply hit next, and it's then going to go and run the analysis completely server-side. So it's going to run that analysis, run it on the server, run all those files through the process. And when it's complete, it's going to then bring the results back through the browser. So in this case, what I'm doing, I've given it 4 different files, and it's calculating what is the max frequency content in across all those files in all the channels I gave it, in this case XYZ loading. So here this dotted line is the max envelope across the whole frequency range of, that's the max, if you like, the max PSD envelope, the max value. And it's done it not just for one channel, but it's done it for all the channels in the file. And when I've completed that, I can hit next, I can download the file, and I'm done. So this is gives you an example, if you like, a quick example of what we mean by an app. So I'm just going to X out of that. It basically takes a more complex procedure and puts a simplified front end on that. So if we look at what how you could create that, one of the things we've done is we've also focused on how to make something like that with an app. Now, in this case, this app is running the Glyphs process. But what you'll see is as we release new functionality, especially over the next releases next year, you'll see increased functionality to embed different analysis tools within apps, such that the app concept is not limited just to being able to run an nCode process. So here, for example, if I open that one we just looked at, because I am the owner of this app, I am able to edit that app process. So if I look into what we call the app designer view of that app, I actually see the different components that makes it up. In process here, we select some time series files, we calculate some PSDs, we calculate the envelope, which gives us the max. I also have then a display that shows me the PSD max envelope as a plot, and I had a results list. I didn't actually click onto that page where I can actually download those files and then download them to my local PC. And each one of these can be expanded out and configured. So, for example, if I expand out the PSD calculation, I can configure what this part of my app does. So one option here is it's actually using this particular flow. I can pick which flow that's in Aqira I want to run. I can just pick it and include it as part of my app process. So this is a specific component within my app for running Glyphs flows. But we have a variety of different apps components that we can add on. For example, I can add another nCode viewer. I can just drag and drop it and put it at any point I want in my process here. Let me just put a viewer right at the end there. And as I'm building up what is the process steps, the linear steps through my app. Now in this version, it's a sequential step. These are my steps. I do this first. But what you'll see in upcoming releases, the ability then to configure that with logic and conditions to control what happens when you do what within the app. Let me log out, and I'm going to log in as the administrator of this system. And I'm going to show you briefly the licensing aspects of this as well, before we then wrap up and turn it over for a Q&A session. So I'm going to log out, and I'm going to log in here as another user. Now this user gets a completely different dashboard when they log in, and they can see things that are more relevant to an administrator. For example, what products have been used for doing what, how many license units are currently in use, and then also down the left-hand side we see this administration menu. There are different levels of user within Aqira, but it's fairly straightforward. Administrator, and then there's also authors and analysts, and they control what you can do. Administrators have the ability then to define users, and also the ability to define groups. So one of the nice features about these license groups is the fact that I can then control, for example, how many units are available for every group. So, for example, here we have a group that's got 10,000 units out of the 20,000 licensed units available in the system. 10,000 are available for the Detroit CA engineering department. I can edit that if I want. Now let's say I can make that say 5,000. So this is the maximum number of units that can be used in Detroit, and I can say edit the group in Pune and also give them 5,000. I then just need to update license server, and I'm going to hit yes, and it's done. So that's now put a control on those license units to put up a maximum by user group for the number of license tokens that are available. So that's just an example of the kind of things you can do. You can either set a maximum. You can also set a reservation, which means you can say this group always has access to this many units. So you can define it the other way around. Okay, I'm going to finish there. I'm going to just that gives you a feel for running flows and managing flows, running flows, managing those flows, running those flows over the web. Also, concept of an app, what an app is, what that looks like, how you might start, the kind of capabilities that Aqira has for creating apps, simple front ends on processes, and then also from an administration point of view, how you manage users and licenses to make effective use of your license pool available. Now, let me jump back into the PowerPoint, and so that's in summary. So I'm going to hand back now to Keith, who's going to talk you through